Here's another aspect too, because I've had a lot of people say this, right? I've had a lot why didn't they just change the minicamp date, right? Why didn't they do that?
Could have done it last week.
Right.
Do it last week.
But it's hard. But too, here again, I think you get into precedence, and like we know he's God King Aaron Rodgers, but damn, they can't just make him, God King ruler of all, and we just bow down all the time here, right? They set a schedule. I don't know when Rodgers exactly figured out that schedule was, but I guarantee the coaches already knew at that point, and things were kind of set in stone where vacations for everybody else were already figured out. And then it sounds like Rodgers came in and the schedule was already out there, and he's like, oh, wait, I got something scheduled then. And it's like, well, tough shit. Like, we got 90 other people here. They got lives. They got a schedule. We know what it is. We're not going to just change everything for you. So there's a little more moving parts to that, than just saying it, I guess is what I'm saying there.
Right. And that's a great point.
Right.
That's a great point.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
And I got some insight to that effect. Now, as it relates to where Aaron Rodgers was instead of being at mandatory minicamp, Saleh wasn't asked. And I posted before the show today, the Jets aren't saying, on the record or off the record, they're not saying. And if Saleh had been asked, I believe he would have said, that's Aaron's business. It's up for him to disclose it. And let's see if the no-holds-barred New York media asks him that question when they have a crack at him when he shows up for training camp. I have a feeling that even in the safest of safe space podcasts, somebody will ask him, where in the hell were you the week that the world blew up over whether or not Aaron Rodgers was at mandatory minicamp? It's impossible to have any credibility whatsoever and not ask him that question. What I noticed yesterday, and I don't want to get into a fight unnecessarily. If the reporters in question want to be upset with me, that's fine. But when you do this for 23 years, you start to see patterns. And I know what teams will do. They want to get their story out there. Who do you use to get your story out there? You pick somebody from the group of reporters that cover your team and you give them the story. And it's part of this loose quid pro quo to keep the peace, to get access, to have cooperation from the team. There are times you're expected to hold your nose and say to the world, this is the team's version. It happened when we had that story that Colleen Wolfe of NFL Network blurted out during the league meetings, that there was some awkward exchange between the owner of the team, Woody Johnson, and head coach Robert Saleh. In comes Connor Hughes of SNY with what was clearly the team's version. The Hassan Reddick no-show for mandatory minicamp. We talked about this yesterday. Here comes Connor Hughes with the team's version. Well, we thought we had an agreement with Hassan Reddick, and apparently he didn't live up to his end of it. So here's the tweet from Connor Hughes from yesterday morning, just after our show went off the air, when this was all a big deal and the Jets were getting vilified in many circles for how they handled this situation. Rodgers planned this trip while he was still rehabbing from the torn Achilles tendon. Jets have known about it from the moment there was an overlap with the release of the minicamp schedule. Let's stop right there. Let's put a pin in it right there. This speaks to what you were talking about. They could have coordinated this, and maybe they should have coordinated this, and maybe there should have been a greater effort by the Jets to say to Aaron, you've got this trip that you've been planning for months. Can you let us know when it's going to be so we can finalize our offseason schedule? And Chris, there's a way to do that off the grid, and nobody needs to know.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
That they made an exception, or that they bowed down to Aaron Rodgers.
Exactly.
They're just trying to be as proactive as possible to plan the offseason in a way that avoids an unnecessary conflict. Because if they would have done it last week, then it just would have been Rodgers was absent for the final 2 days of OTAs, not Rodgers skipped mandatory minicamp and it was an unexcused absence.
Right.
So that's an important point. They could have been more proactive there.
Yeah, they could have. And that's where, I don't know about the schedule being set already, and then he was like, wait, whatever. But the other point of this, too, is, like, you played in the NFL for 20 years. You kind of know when minicamp's going to be. Like, come on. Duh. It's going to be in the middle of June. Like, come on. Screw your schedule. Screw seeing somebody else's schedule. John Gruden didn't need to tell me when minicamp was. I knew the general time frame, and I was going to freaking be there. So that's all I would say. I know he's Aaron Rodgers, and he's the man, and I get that. But, he's not as much on the man on the field as he used to be. And it seems like he's worried about being the man off the field more than anything right now. And that's all I'm saying. And he's put the Jets in a really, really tough situation. And, yeah, maybe they could have handled it a little bit better, but damn, it's a tough one. And I feel bad for Robert Saleh. I really do, because it's kind of a no-win spot he's in, trying to, finagle both the media, or all three. The media, make Rodgers feel good, send the right message to your team, really in a tough spot, and that's Rodgers doing.
And, that is a very good point. He knows when the break is. I mean, we planned a family beach trip, and I didn't just plan it for the second week of June.
Right.
I planned it for a week in July when I knew the show was going to be off.
Exactly,
and even
right.
before I did. And Matt Casey has the receipts. I always check with him. Before we lock it in. When is the hiatus this year? Because we're going away for a week, and I want to make sure that it's not when the show's going to be on.
Right.
Period.
And you're not making $40 million.
You're right.
Right.
20, not as far as you know, 20 years in the industry would probably give you a clue as to when mandatory minicamp might be and the general time frame that you would like to avoid. And even before you do it, it's on you to go to the team and say, do you know when mandatory minicamp is going to be? Because I've got a trip I'd like to take, and I want to plan it for when I'm not expected to be here, because I need to be here. I want to be here. I want to live up to the words that I used on January 8th, that it needs to be all about winning in 2024. Back to the Hughes tweet. Rodgers is unexcused because you can't excuse a trip but not a contract dispute. Semantics, but there's no unrest inside the building. And I think this is apples and oranges. And I think this gets to the point I was making yesterday, that somebody on the payroll who practices law or gives them legal advice got caught up in this whole CBA question of whether or not you can fine a player for an unexcused mandatory minicamp absence when you have excused someone else for not attending. I think that is what drove this bus, and they allowed the lawyers to shape the strategy. We have to call it unexcused because then we can't find Hassan Reddick, or we can't find the guy next year who says, I want to take an ayahuasca trip too during mandatory minicamp. And I still think my own reading of the CBA points to the idea that you do have the discretion to excuse it. But if it's unexcused, then you have to fine him. If you excuse it, it's okay, because there's too many other teams that are excusing absences during mandatory minicamp for this to be some sort of, oh, no, we can never excuse it. Otherwise, we can't find players who don't show up.
No, you're right. There's people, excused for, hey, whether it's an emergency, right? We've seen the marriage thing. Hey, it's been on the books, and I've been, scheduled to get married for 7 months, so it was way before the minicamp schedule came out and all that, anything there, right? So, yeah, excuse goes on. Hey, we're just going to let you rest, or go ahead, start your – it goes on. It does. But, again, we don't know. I don't know any quarterbacks that are doing that right now. And again, I know Connor Hughes at the end of this statement talks about, hey, he's been at every voluntary workout and all that. I get it. But still, at the same time, it's the only mandatory one. It's the most intense part of the offseason, practicing and what you can do and get done out there. And again, he's Aaron Rodgers, he needed a quarterback, and it's the middle of June, and there's not much to talk about. And, of course, we're going to talk about a guy who, again, has become one of the more polarizing guys on all of football. Just when it kind of seemed like he had people swaying in his way, right, and people were starting to, kind of feel sorry for him, and damn, the Packers don't give him enough talent and help him, he's kind of ruined that with half the NFL fan base. So now where you go, I can go in a given room, and Rodgers is awesome. Oh, my gosh, I can't stand Rodgers. I don't want to ever see him ever again. That's kind of what it is with Rodgers right now. That's where he's done it. So, of course, yeah, we're talking about it. It's not really a big deal. He'll hit a slant, I know, in week 2, but you're right. It's hard to draw that line of where it could have got better or worse or whatever. And the bottom line is he should be there. There's no other excuse than that right there.
It worked on me. Remember during Hard Knocks last year?
Yeah.
I was coming around.
Right.
And then after he has the Achilles tear, he's a sympathetic figure, but he didn't do what Tom Brady did back in 2008 when he suffered the ACL tear, which is go away. You're not part of it anymore. The train keeps rolling without you. He continued to hover over the team and floating this idea of he might come back. And that's what got people to start to say, okay, too much. Doing the McAfee show every Tuesday when you're not able to play and chastising players for saying this and doing that. you're not part of it right now. Focus on your rehab and come back next year. And I think that's what started. Then all the stuff in the offseason, all the podcast appearances, all the conspiracy theories, the RFK Jr. stuff, the Jimmy Kimmel stuff. That was the first one.
Oh, that crazy.
Happened at about the same time that he said no BS in the building other than winning. He got himself in a position where he had to apologize to Jimmy Kimmel for suggesting that his name was on the Jeffrey Epstein Island guest list, which that's how it all started. And I think any goodwill he might have engendered in 2023 started to go downhill slowly as he continued to talk and, suggest he might come back and play. And then I think it went off the cliff this offseason. And now, it's going to be interesting to see how he's received when he shows up for training camp by the media, by the fans, by his teammates. And Chris, to your point about why he thinks he can do this goes back to last year when he gave up $35 million. I remember when he did it. I thought, whoa, hey, Jets, you're saving $35 million. But do you think he really did this, no strings attached? Now you owe him. You owe him. Give me what I want as it relates to former teammates and friends that I want on the roster. Give me what I want. I want a seat at the table for these things. I want this. I want that. And I suspect at some level he's probably pissed about how they've handled it because, hey, man, I gave up $35 million last year. You know how that's human nature. When you do something for someone, you give them something, you do something. It's like when Kenny Bandy gave Jerry Seinfeld the suit. You feel like you can hold it over them for the rest of their lives. And I think at some level, he thinks he can hold that $35 million over the Jets for as long as he's an employee of the team.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of it. Again, it's that's where it's a delicate situation. Hey, they wanted him. They traded away assets to get him, right? They've made him the man. And of course, hey, we're good and we need a quarterback. So, they've gone all in and let's just say kissing the butt department, right? Because, hey, we need them. We got to have them. And then I think when you add the $35 million like you're talking about, right? And then you add in that they've never really had a franchise quarterback like this and witnessed it, right? So I think a lot of them are a little in awe, right? This is different than even Brett Favre because Aaron Rodgers has got his tentacles in the organization a little bit more and he's checking everybody out and all that. Brett, I think we know like Brett Favre when he came to the Jets or in general was just like, call the play, I'll throw a touchdown and I'll see you and we'll drink a beer after and we'll do it again next week. And maybe I'll show up to practice because I don't want to. I don't know. But so it's different that way, but I'm having fun. But Rodgers, yeah. I mean, I think there was a little bit of that too. Awe and, oh my gosh, he's all over everything and the team is eating out of his hands and holy crap, he can still throw the ball unlike any human I've ever seen, right? So I think all of that with them wanting him, the power that Rodgers has because of the greatness of who he is and all of that, they're in a tough spot. And then that's again where I go back to why did you put your team in this tough spot right here, right now, when you knew minicamp was going to be in this general time frame and it's New York and it's the Jets and right, it's the Jet fans are annoyed already for sure. I didn't talk to one yesterday that isn't like, what the hell? Why would he do this? Why do we always have an issue? Why is it always us? Why do we always get the guy? I mean, how many times did I hear that yesterday going around town and everything else? So yeah, he's got some goodwill he needs to get back in the good graces, I should say, of the New York Jet fans.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.